Ever catch yourself, like, wincing, as you watch that taxi meter just climb and climb, or debating that second slice of cake, like the internal battle is just raging. It's kind of fascinating how money taps into something way deeper than just, like, math, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into, well, the psychology behind those financial impulses, those why did I buy that moments. And we're doing it with Scott Rick's book, Tightwads and Spendthrifts. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, definitely. You're hitting on something super important there with that internal battle, because like we often treat money as this purely logical thing, right?
Yeah.
But our brains, they don't see it that way. They process spending through a totally emotional lens too.
It's true. Rick even calls it the pain of paying, right?
Exactly.
Like our brains are kind of hardwired to slam the brakes on spending.
Yes. And it's not just like a saying or whatever. Brain imaging studies, they've actually shown that for some people, forking over cash, it triggers a genuine stress response. It activates those same neural pathways as physical pain.
Get out.
Yeah, which kind of helps explain like why some people are so hesitant to spend, right, even on things they need.
Right.
While others, they're out there like breezing through a shopping spree without a care in the world. It's about like really understanding those deep-seated neurological reactions we all have.
Okay, so it's not just me then. My credit card really eyes out to get me.
Totally.
But seriously, that's where Rick's Tightwad Spendthrift scale comes in handy, right?
Yeah.
To like figure out where we each fall on this whole spectrum of financial, comfort.
Exactly. And it's important to remember it's not just about being like frugal or whatever, It's more about measuring how much discomfort you feel when you're spending.
Okay.
Are you the type who tracks every penny?
Yeah.
Or are you reaching for your wallet without a second thought?
So where do most people land on this scale? Like, are we talking about a 50-50 split, or is one type more common?
You know what? Statistically speaking, there are way more tightwads out there than you might think.
Really? Huh. It's interesting. I feel like, you're constantly bombarded with these messages to spend.
Right.
So I just figured most people were like all in on that.
It's a super common misconception. But here's the thing. Both tightwads and spendthrifts, they can be totally financially successful.
Okay.
It's not about good or bad, It's more about like getting to know your own tendencies.
Right.
And figuring out strategies that actually work for your financial goals and values. Self-awareness is huge here.
Absolutely. Like whether you're, clipping coupons or booking that first-class flight, it's about finding that thing that works for you.
Totally.
But let's dig into the why behind these spending patterns. Like Rick's book, it's full of these crazy anecdotes, these stories of like extreme frugality.
Yeah.
And lavish spending.
Oh, I know.
They really bring these concepts to life.
They do. Those anecdotes give you a peek into like the deeper psychology of money, Yeah.
For example, Rick talks about this one person. They were like so meticulous about saving money, but get this, they could not bring themselves to buy a simple heater for their bathroom, even in the middle of winter.
Oh no. Like that's commitment.
Right.
I mean, I love a good deal, but a warm bathroom, that's like a reasonable expense to me. So what's the psychological hang up there?
Well, it all comes down to this thing called opportunity cost. And it's a big deal for tightwads.
Okay.
They're basically hardwired to zero in on what they're missing out on by spending, even if it's like a small amount.
So it's like their brain is saying, hold on, that $50 heater, that could be $500 in the future if I invest it right.
Exactly. That potential future gain, it totally overshadows their discomfort in the present moment.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to basic needs.
It's almost like they're living in the future, right? While their present self is shivering in the bath.
But that makes me think about the flip side. What about those who are like all about that spending life? Is there a psychological, reason for those splurge happy moments?
Oh, absolutely. Think about a time when like maybe you went a little overboard with a purchase, like you talked yourself into that just one more thing at the checkout.
Happens every time.
Rick calls this the what the hell effect.
Okay.
And it especially affects spendthrifts. It's like once you cross a certain spending line, that's it.
It's that feeling of, well, I already spent this much, a little more won't hurt.
Yeah.
I've totally been there.
It's such a slippery slope. It shows how emotional and honestly impulsive spending can be. It's not always about logic or budgets or anything.
Right.
Actually, Rick tells this great story about Sammy Davis Jr., the entertainer. You know him.
Oh, yeah.
So his business manager told him, look, you're $100,000 in debt. You got to slow down on the spending. And what does Sammy Davis Jr. do? He goes out and buys the manager a $600 gold cigarette case as a thank you for the advice.
Okay, that's either like incredibly generous or completely clueless.
Right.
Maybe both. But it shows how differently people can be about money.
Totally. It's like these tendencies are part of who they are. But speaking of relationships, let's talk about how these totally different money styles can affect our bonds with people, especially partners.
Right, because dealing with finances as a couple, that adds a whole other level of complication.
For sure.
So do opposites actually attract when it comes to money?
It's a question everyone asks. Relationship experts, economists, everyone. And Rick's research, it kind of says that there might be a spark initially between tightwads and spendthrifts. Maybe we're drawn to what we don't have ourselves.
Right.
Like the tightwad sees the spendthrift being spontaneous and exciting.
Yeah.
And the spendthrift likes that the tightwad is practical and grounded.
So it's that whole like yin and yang thing, but with money.
Yeah, exactly. But like any good dance, there needs to be some harmony, right?
Right.
And that's where things can get tricky. You see, there might be that initial attraction. But down the line, these couples, they often have more conflict when it comes to like goals and habits around money.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to think someone's free spending ways are fun when you're just dating.
Right.
But then bills and mortgages hit, and suddenly those differences become a really big deal.
Exactly. And this all ties into that debate about joint accounts versus separate accounts. You'd think, right, that merging your finances would make things smoother.
Right, yeah.
But research actually says not always.
Really?
Yeah, opening a joint account right away, especially for newlyweds, it can actually make them less happy in the relationship.
Wow, that's so interesting. Why is that?
Well, when all your money is combined, every single spending decision, it's like under a microscope.
Yeah.
And that can cause resentment, especially if your spending styles are different.
So it's like that saying, familiarity breeds, contempt.
Yes.
But like the financial version.
Exactly. And it's not just about disagreeing on what you buy. It's also this observer effect thing. Like we change our behavior when we know someone's watching.
Right.
So with shared finances, it can feel like your partner's always judging your spending, which, can lead to tension.
Oh, yeah. Makes you self-conscious.
Exactly.
That reminds me of those times I've hidden a shopping bag from my partner. Not even because I felt guilty, just to avoid the conversation.
Right.
But that brings up a bigger question. Is being totally financially transparent always the answer?
Right.
Or should we have some privacy when it comes to spending?
That's where Rick talks about this idea of financial translucency. It's not about keeping secrets.
Okay.
It's more about recognizing that being completely honest, it isn't always necessary or even good for a relationship.
Okay, so financial translucency. Break that down for me. What's a good balance?
So think of it this way. Do you really need to tell your partner about every coffee you buy or every magazine?
Right.
Probably not. Those little expenses, don't even mention them.
Okay.
It's about focusing on the important stuff. Saving, debt, big purchases. Those are the things to really talk about openly.
It's about transparency, but with some breathing room, knowing when to let things go.
Yes, exactly. Now, that doesn't mean hide big purchases or financial decisions. Those need to be transparent.
Okay.
But for everyday spending, a little freedom can really help a relationship.
That makes a lot of sense. What about gift giving? That seems like a recipe for disaster for couples who think differently about money. Like when one person is all about the grand gestures, but the other is more low-key.
Oh, yeah, that's a minefield for sure. Rick tells a funny story about this in the book. It involves the Kate Spade clutch.
Oh, yeah, the Kate Spade clutch incident. I don't want to give anything away, but let's just say it's a good example of what not to do when your gift-giving styles clash.
It really is. It shows how what one person thinks is super romantic, the other person might absolutely hate. Like, the spendthrift thinks they're being loving with this big, expensive gift.
Right.
But the tightwad just sees it as, like, a waste of money.
And it's not even just about the gift itself, right?
Yeah.
It's what it means.
Exactly. For spendthrifts, spending a lot on someone they love, that's how they show affection.
Yeah.
But for tightwads, it's more about being practical and finding something with actual value. So how do we fix this?
That's the big question. What's the secret to giving good gifts when you and your partner have such different ideas about money? So how do we fix this gift-giving thing? What's the secret when you and your partner are, like, speaking different money languages?
It's all about understanding those love languages. Spendthrifts, they can show they care without breaking the bank, you know?
Okay.
Think about it. A handwritten letter, a home-cooked meal, even a personalized experience.
Well, those are good.
Right. Those gestures, they mean way more to a tightwad than some generic expensive thing.
Makes sense. It's like the thought is the real splurge.
Exactly. And for all the tightwads out there, the key is to choose gifts that are, like, well thought out, you know?
Okay.
Something that shows you really get your partner's interests. Stepping outside that comfort zone a little bit.
I like it. So it's not just about the money. It's about showing you really know the person.
Yeah.
But what about raising kids with all this? Like, what if the parents have totally different money styles? How do you teach kids about money when you don't agree on it yourself?
It's interesting, right? You'd think kids just pick up our habits.
Yeah, for sure.
But research says it's not that simple. They don't always copy us directly. Kids pay attention to what we do.
So it's more about actions than words.
Totally. Think about, like, going to the grocery store with kids.
Oh, yeah.
If they always see us overspending, giving in to those impulse buys, they're more likely to do the same thing, you know?
Makes sense.
But if they see us making thoughtful choices,
Right.
talking about our finances, they'll probably pick up those habits too.
It's true. We're always setting an example, whether we realize it or not.
Exactly. But what happens when parents don't agree? Like, how do you find that middle ground, especially with this whole tightwad spendthrift dynamic?
Right, because you're not always going to be on the same page.
Exactly. You got to talk it out and compromise.
Okay.
With kids, it's about seeing both sides. Like, let's say you're arguing about some expensive gadget. Maybe the tightwad has a point, right?
Yeah, like, do they really need that, or is it just going to end up in the back of the closet?
Exactly. It's about teaching them to be smart about their money, not just buying a bunch of stuff.
Love that. So we're teaching smart spending habits.
Yes. But then, when it comes to experiences, you know, like traveling, seeing new places, that's where I'd say listen to the spendthrift.
Because those memories, those experiences, they stay with you.
Exactly. It's all about balance, right?
Yeah.
Teaching your kids a healthy relationship with money.
This has been amazing. It's really got me thinking. This isn't just about like budgeting or whatever. It's about understanding yourself and the people around you, you know?
Couldn't agree more. That's what's so great about Rick's book is like a journey. You examine your own relationship with money, how it affects you, your partner, everyone.
And it leaves you thinking, right? Like, is this just how we're wired, or can we actually change our money mindset?
The million-dollar question. We all have to figure that out for ourselves.
No.
But one thing's for sure. The more we understand about spending, the better choices we can make.
So it's not about being perfect with money. It's about being more aware, having those conversations, even when they're tough.
Exactly. It's like any relationship, really. You got to work at it to find that balance.
On that note, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about. So until next time, remember, it's not just about how much money you have. It's about finding that sweet spot between financial well-being and really great relationships.
Here's to making smart choices with our money and connecting with the people we care about.
And on that note, we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
It's your body.